As I record this video, it's 20 years to the day that I quit a $1 million equity trader job. Almost within an hour, actually, now that I think of it. It was right around this time of day. And so I'm 56 years old today. And I'm just gonna talk about how I had that role and how I ended up quitting it and how I planned to quit it. And just for clarity, I'm not bragging about how I had that type of job. I really came from economic no man's land. I didn't come from money. I didn't know anybody. I had no connections whatsoever. It's a long story, how I ended up in that role. But that aside, those are topics for another day. It's, for me, if I was to reflect on it, what could I possibly do? If I could go back in time and tell my 36-year-old self what good came of that decision and maybe what didn't, what I'd rather go back and change if I could. One big particular item I would say is clearly, for me, financially, it didn't work out as well. I mean, that would be something that purely based on finance, I'd say. When you leave an opportunity like that, unless you've got something to replicate it with, that's not going to happen. But I can accurately say that money isn't everything. Now, this particular job was a dream come true of mine. I mean, there was a lot of people, some of whom I knew, that would literally give their firstborn child their left arm and anything else to have had the opportunity that I got. And even though I came from nothing, so to speak, money-wise, it was a dream come true for me as well. And you have to wonder, well, if it's a dream come true and a dream job and it was very entrepreneurial, why would somebody leave something like that? And that's a really good question. And when I think back 20 years, try to think objectively, why did I quit something that was supposedly a dream job? And some of the things I'll say are just, you're putting it through a 20-year lens. And I believe I can objectively recall everything pretty accurately. And one of the big memories I have is just the politics behind something like that. You look in the movies, you see in the movies the sort of trading environments, and it's cutthroat. But I would say the cutthroat part didn't come from being a market maker, being an equity trader at that level. I was what was considered in Canada. I was a Canadian and US licensed trader. I was a market maker for an exchange, and that required a lot of aptitude. It required a lot of skill, and it was one of those things they were really good at determining who'd be good at it and who wouldn't, and you could show if you weren't, you wouldn't be around very long. So you had to have certain kind of emotional disposition, and in those type of environments, you had to be able to, first of all, you had to be profitable, but you also had to know how to lose money properly. And I know that sounds counterintuitive and doesn't make sense probably, but if you couldn't handle being able to manage losses, you'd probably be out of there quicker than if you were profitable. Probably the biggest thing, if I could go back and tell myself whether I should have done this or that, it was kind of like being a professional athlete, in that if a professional athlete, for example, I'm not editing these videos, so I'm just kind of thinking off the cuff, okay? I wanted to make this exactly on the day that I quit this job. So professional athletes, you hear about like football players or other pro athletes, you hear the stories where a lot of them end up broke. Well, why is that? I mean, well, first of all, you have a really short shelf life. Most of them on average, right? You do hear like there's the football players that, or hockey players, baseball players that have a 20-year career. They make 10 million a year. They make another 20 and huge sponsorships and whatnot. And, they come out the other end really well unless they blew all their money. You hear about people making fortunes and they just blow it all. But some of them become businessmen. Some of them invest wisely and do really well. And I don't know if that's, I wasn't a pro athlete, so I don't know if that's like the majority or the minority or whatever. I don't know the stories if, they're all true or whatever. But you know what I'm talking about. The general idea is some people who come into a really like a windfall sort of job or situation. You hear it about lottery winners. They'll often just blow it, right? They don't know how to handle it. Everybody's knocking on their door and give me some money, give me a loan that I'll never pay back. But to go back, I would tell myself, well, did you really need to quit that job? I had planned on it for various reasons. Some of them, the structure of like the nature of the role and how it worked and the cost of actually doing it, that costs that don't even exist today for retail traders. It's just non-existent. The job that I had that I quit in 2006, those things don't really exist anymore. So it's not like if I hadn't have quit it, I'd still be doing it today. I probably wouldn't have been doing it much longer after the time I quit anyway. But financially, it definitely had a huge impact. So if I was to go back, I'd say, did you really have to do that at that time? Think longer. What's your reasons? What's your backup? What's the plan? And I was younger, and even though I planned on it, I didn't have a long-term plan, and it took me so much work and so much commitment to get to that point. The courses that I had to take to be licensed, just being in the right place at the right time, talking to the right people, to ensure that the role actually happened for me, as much as I could influence that. I'd say definitely take a long, hard look. Put your ego and your emotions in your back pocket. If you're able to do that in a trading environment, then from a life perspective and a so-called career perspective, think longer and harder. I did not have to leave that role. So if I was to go back today, would I just up and quit it, even though I put thought into it? No, and I would say that's a regret. But life's not all about money and finance, and I know that because following that, I did go to a couple of other firms, but in between, I had enough experience that I could do things on my own. And honestly, sitting around by yourself, even 20 years ago, leveraging the internet and remote capabilities, I was able to trade, and I'd be on my own. Well, guess what the reality of that is? The reality is, and I say this today to anybody who thinks they're gonna get out there with zero commissions and trade their way to becoming a millionaire, I'd say this: for what? I mean, I get the whole getting rich quick or even slowly scheme, but here's the reality. You're literally, most of the time, you're sitting in a room by yourself. None of your family is going to understand. You're probably not, unless you're talking to random people online, no one's going to really understand what you're doing. And you're probably not going to know anybody personally in real life, apart from social media, that that can relate to you that's doing the exact same thing. So you end up sitting in a room trying to squeak out profit or manage your losses every single day. It's that takes a little bit of your soul away every single day. Whether it's because you're just sitting there trying to make a profit, trying to control your losses, it's not worth it on a human level. And what I realized that I missed, that I'd also go back and tell myself, all of the highly experienced traders that I had the benefit of sitting beside and having that camaraderie with every single day, some of the most experienced traders on one of the most prestigious trading floors in Canada at the time, I had the benefit of being mentored by them and sitting with them, and I guess I didn't have enough gratitude in me to realize that as I departed, thinking that I was going to go and be able to mirror a lot of what I did there on my own, sitting in a room by myself. No, it doesn't work that way. So I would go back and I would tell myself that, you know, when you work extremely hard and you achieve something at that level, you also have to question, well, as I did, and I would advise anybody else to, is, you know, you hear about self-sabotage. What is that? It's people who just get in their own way, can't get out of their own way. You know, like what I was able to do was against all odds. As I said in the beginning, I didn't come from money. I didn't have any connections. I didn't know anybody. I'd started from nothing. As a matter of fact, five years before I was able to achieve that opportunity and privilege role that I had, I was working on a factory floor. Actually, I was working on a Campbell Soup factory floor out in the middle of nowhere for 2 years full time, pushing around 2,000-pound tanks of stuff that went into food. And I should tell that story another day. How did I go from being a factory floor worker to working on and becoming a professional equity trader at a very large, prestigious bank? It's a good story to tell another day. And it's something to be said for when, you know, you get out there and you make shit happen. You figure it the fuck out. And I have that saying, it's kind of an acronym, FITFO. You know, like you're able to make something happen, and there's nothing more rewarding than making something happen from nothing. And then to have the gratitude and the humility to manage that properly. And thinking back 20 years, I don't think I managed it properly. So I wasn't at a level of maturity, and there's probably a bit of self-sabotage. It made complete sense at the time, absolute complete sense. There was nothing about the decision I made at the time that didn't make sense then. But I'd say I'd reflect on it differently now. So financially, I would have been much better off if I had stayed in it a bit longer. And personally, like the time, my day-to-day spending, because it wasn't like a regular job, it was very unusual. I was extremely lucky, regardless of the fact that I didn't have a natural path to get there as some people did. I would have learned from the real cutthroat political situations there, which once it became very cutthroat, I became very cutthroat because you had to be to survive. And I thought, okay, if some people are going to be like that with me, I'm going to be like that with them 10 times more. So that it wasn't exactly always a friendly environment. But you got to do what you got to do. And so, what else would I do differently? What else would I do differently? What else would I tell my younger self to be more mindful of? Maybe some of the things that were benefits. I got to spend some of the most critically important time of my life with my young daughters. And that was, you can't get that time back. You can get so-called career time back if you're lucky. You can get, you can find ways to replace income, but you can't get family and you can't get time back. So that's something I absolutely don't regret at all whatsoever. And that in and of itself was worth it. So that's something that I would say, without a doubt, was beneficial. And also, one of the things that I noticed, and I would say this kind of tongue-in-cheek back in the day, but I realized that when you're sitting there staring at a screen, and back then it was like, about 6 different screens, most of the time you're doing nothing. You're staring at screens, staring at numbers, talking shit with the guys that you're sitting beside, but most of the time it's really quiet and you're doing a whole lot of nothing. And quite frankly, after several years, you observe others and you observe yourself, and people tend to become a little bit off. You're in a really insulated environment. And all I can think of is a similarity, fast forward now 20 years later, and you see and hear about, young people, and now a whole generation of people who have grown up on screens and on phones, mirroring a lot of those days, because I'd be staring at a screen for like 8 hours a day, watching numbers, digits, flash by, looking for moments of opportunity to either cut losses or try to make some money, try to be profitable. So yeah, there was something about that I realized at the time, that many of the people who I respected and admired immensely, you spend 8 hours staring at a screen all day long, and often you would be a little bit off after a certain number of years. And now, again, as I said, you're starting to see that with younger generations, or even older people my age. Everybody seems to be addicted to screens. So it's kind of resembles a lot of what I was dealing with 20 years ago. Do I miss it? Not particularly. And, the novelty pretty much wore off. The novelty of, it was a craft. Like I studied, I was a student of it. I used to read books, and even before becoming that, about legendary traders that achieved things at a time when, they would be marking down the prices on chalkboards, or people were trading on the street. So it was a deep interest of mine, and I just thought it was a craft of sorts. But, as there's a lot of criticism of that environment too, in that industry, because you're really creating nothing. It's just, you're trying to make a profit out of something. And when you're working within one of these institutions, and it's very different today, it's all computer scientists and artificial intelligence and algorithms. And there was an element of that then, but definitely not like today. It's the ability to have a bit of an edge. Like you hear about edges, that existed just by the nature of, if there wasn't anything else other than the people that were around me every single day, and who I was able to benefit from, their presence. That was worth a lot of money. So I should make other videos and tell a story about how I got there from a factory floor to one of the biggest and best trading floors that existed at the time. But would I do it again? Yeah, I'd go back and do it again. But would I have left in the way that I did? No, I think I should have figured another way to make a move if I wanted to get out of that particular area, and know a little bit about my weaknesses and my blind spots, as to maybe avoiding any kind of self-sabotage of my own success. This is a common thing. I used to feel a lot of guilt about that. Enough time has passed now, and I know enough about myself to know that I understand those things and can compensate for them and avoid the dangers of, you don't want to sabotage your own success. Especially at my age now, I'm 56. Like, I don't need to help myself not be successful by any means. So that's a part of the story anyway, about how 20 years ago today, I quit a job, basically $1 million job that would have been worth millions over even the next few years of that role, to try to live a better life. And I made other mistakes too, which I'll talk about. But overall, it's worked out. Maybe not financially, but definitely personally, and in the long run, it all worked out. Let's just put it that way. Thanks for listening, and I'll talk more about this soon.